Hello. Okay, so I think I know everybody, but except maybe for a couple of faces that are new to me. But my name is Milena Gongora. I work with Anna and Robert and everybody else at the GBRF in the water quality team. And so I'm taking care of the monitoring and evaluation across the project. And so this system sort of evolved out of that. So yeah, so but basically today, giving you an introduction of the system that GBRF developed to track progress and capture M&E data for the partnership component. So I have a few slides I wanted to show with some intro. Let me see if I managed to share the right screen. And maybe before we start, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where I am, which is Brisbane. And I recognize the north and the south of the Brisbane River as home of the Turrbal and Jagera people. And I pay my respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging, and recognize their cultural and spiritual connection to the land. So, all right, so share screen. Can you see like the presentation? Oh.
Yep.
Am I frozen? No, it's all good?
Yeah, all good.
Cool. All right, so yeah, so please, we're quite a small group. We all know each other. If you have any questions along the way, just interrupt me. I cannot see the chat at the moment, so you can put something in the chat and maybe Anna can let me know, or you can just speak up. So, all right, so I guess you all know under the Reef Trust Partnership Agreement, we had a very sort of strong mandate and commitment to be transparent, to be accountable, and to maximize the impact of our investment. So very early on, we realized that in order for us to honor this commitment, we needed to have visibility of everything that happened on the ground, pretty much. We needed a bunch of us had been involved in reef water quality programs in the past that had done it differently, and we realized we needed to see everything because we needed real-time information to be able to respond in a timely manner as managers and as administrators, and also so that we could maximize investment. We also wanted to have access to this real-time data so that we could be accountable by being able to report to Australian government and to the public sort of on a very short turnaround if people ask questions, inquiries, or just at any point in time we wanted to know what was going on, where, how much impact we had achieved. We wanted to be able to turn around that quickly. So we made a decision to have the data internal to GBRF, and this was a first thing in the reef water quality investment space. If you've been involved in other programs, you know it's always been a funding body funds, say, providers to deliver, and those providers report to paddock to reef. A lot of the data that happens sort of at a farm scale, but the investor never sees that. And so, so that's sort of where we wanted to have a difference. So, all right, let's see if I can pass this slide. So the sort of information I'm talking about, so these are sort of the M&E indicators, monitoring and evaluation indicators, where we are taking things, as you're all familiar with, I'm sure, about farm management, biophysical data, engagement, socioeconomic data, and also the capacity we're building and sort of the social capital, if you like. So you might be familiar with this, farm management. This is what I'm talking about in terms of all the farming practices, making sure we're operating under best farming practices, what your farm inputs are. Biophysical data, talking now about like the tons of sediment saved, the DIN saved, and I'm talking both about modeling and monitoring where available. Things like gullies and stream banks that have been fixed. What is the estimates from that? Has there been monitoring of the vegetation around it? We also have some information about engagement, which is your usual stuff when you run a program, event participation, stuff like that. Importantly, we have the socioeconomic side of things. So largely leveraging on the OGBR framework for social monitoring, adding a couple of other things to sort of complement that. And also, as I said, the capacity we were building, the networks were building the capacity in delivery providers. Oh, someone else is waiting in the lobby. All right, so this is what we wanted. This is what we need to get. But what we particularly wanted to have internal, and what I mentioned that investors in the past had never had internal, was that access to the farm management data, so to the spatial farm or farmer level data. So I'm talking about delineating polygons around farms or paddocks, and capturing those practices, and also the pollutant reductions that each of those projects is expected to have, the socioeconomic information associated to those farmers. And along with that, we were obviously also interested in having information about progress, how much each of those projects were progressing. So when I'm talking about project from here onwards, it's the project with a farmer, so between a delivery provider and a farmer. So that was a decision we made. So then we had a couple of challenges, and it's challenges that you guys might have faced in the past as well, and will no doubt in the future. And is that our program is very large, and it's also very complex. So these are all the lists in this slide of all the programs we have. And then in pink and purple, we have sort of managers. So these are the people that take oversight of that. And then in blue, DP stands for delivery provider. So we have multiple delivery providers in each program. So as you can see, it's a large program with a lot of different, I suppose, sub-programs, a lot of delivery providers, and then this hierarchy of managers that need to, we wanted these managers to be able to use and access the data as well. So this starts to bring things around confidentiality. Obviously, no one wants to share their data or have other people see it. People, as you know, are very sensitive of this data. So we needed to make sure people could only see their data, but that managers could see all the data for the programs they were managing, and GBRF could see everything. So it posed quite an interesting sort of challenge in terms of user access and user privacy. Because we wanted to be able to have full involvement, it's another person in the lobby, a full involvement if we needed it, but also be able to to give responsibility to these managers so that they could, carry out the program. And also as well, that different programs were collecting different things. Some of them were collecting things about gullies, some of them were collecting things about, DEAN and management practices. So even like the data that everybody was accessing was different. So in terms of the scale, we sort of estimate that when the program's fully running, we'll have that in excess of 1,300 growers and more than 100 graziers. I think it's more around 150 graziers. So yeah, quite large. So this is the system we came up with. So I guess other considerations we needed was that it was practical, that it was easy to use for people on the ground. We know extension officers are not fans of entering data. I mean, no one is. So, and because we were talking about the real time, we were expecting people to be updating this data fortnightly. So we really wanted them to make it easy for them. Another consideration is it couldn't be very expensive. We didn't want to spend a whole lot of money in it. We wanted a system that we had control of, so that it was basically custom made but flexible enough, and that we could pass it to someone, and that another entity in the future, and when the RTP finishes, for example, and they could still be maintained. So it wasn't locked up, that it could be serviced by different technology providers. So this is a system we came up with that sort of met all those requirements. So it's based on a platform called ArcGIS. If you're GIS inclined, this will be very familiar to you. It's sort of a gold standard brand in terms of spatial data management. So we have a database that we designed, and it sits on a cloud. And so what we have here at the bottom is we have sort of three types of users. So we have the delivery providers who are really sort of the people that are the machinery behind everything. They enter the data. And so they enter the data through a custom-made app that we made for them. And they can have that in their computers or in their mobile devices. And they enter the data. And so when they enter data, it goes to the cloud. And then when they see it from the cloud. And then here in orange, that icon represents the dashboards that we built so that they can see the data. They can also see the data through the app. But when you see the dashboards, you'll see sort of the differences that you have. Now, the other roles were GBRF, obviously as a manager, and then the regional managers and partnership coordinators, which, as I say, they're the local managers for each regional program. We wanted them to have full access to see the data, but we didn't want them to have the ability to edit the data, and neither do we. So want to edit the data because we don't want the data to be corrupted, and also because it's not theirs and not ours. So so then for them, we made these dashboards, and so that they can only see data through the dashboards and do a couple of things that I'll show you in a minute. And it's the same for us. So GBRF, people like Anna and Catalina and Caroline and Greg, who are program managers of individual programs, they can get through the dashboards and they can see how their programs are running. And obviously this supports the sugarcane commodities, grazing, grains, and bananas. Although I think we don't have grains anymore, but we developed it anyway. So Tree and P2A projector are sort of a really essential part of our workflow, but they're not obviously our tool. They're a tool, as you know, designed and managed differently, but we do sort of have them in the process. So I'm going to close this presentation. Oh, that's my acknowledgement to country. Hang on a second. Let me close this and open the dashboard. All right, I'll share a different screen. Now, does anybody have any questions at this stage? All clear. All right. Cool. All right, so can you see a web page? Yeah, cool. So this is sort of our gateway for everything. I call it the GBRF water quality hub. So we make this. So I guess as part of the system that we got from Esri, we issued everybody licenses. So we have an enterprise sort of subscription with them that gives us about 200 licenses. That's enough for basically covering all the players in the program. And so when they log in, so this is something that you need to log in, but they log in to a website, and this is sort of what they see. So they have a download here for like their tools, so for the app, and then they have the dashboards here. And according to the privileges they have, they only see the things that are relevant to them. So, you know, if you're grazing, you see grazing. If you're sugarcane, you see cane. So I'll show you the app. So the app sort of looks like this. Sorry. Can you see the app now, Anna? Yeah. Okay. So it's it sits on the computer. So in fact, I'll just show you here. So or in your mobile device. Takes a few seconds to load. And if it means anything to you, it's based on Survey 123 platform. And so when you open it, according to what your privileges are, you have access to the things that are relevant to you. So I have access to everything, obviously, because I'm under my account. But yeah, if you're grazing, you have a grazing survey, a sugarcane survey, a grain survey. You'd have a banana one if you want. And as part of this app, we've also incorporated the GCAT, so the Gully toolbox, and the CCAT, which is a stream bank toolbox, and monitoring, the Gully monitoring tool and stream bank monitoring tool. But I won't talk about that too much now. So if you're gonna collect some data, it's just as simple as you do this, you open this, and you start entering your data. And so we have, we can capture practice change projects, or we can capture monitoring trials, because we are also funding that. So yeah, you map it, you click on this, you draw a polygon. Just show you very quickly. I'm not going to go through the whole process, but just to to show you. And it's quite sophisticated. You can draw like multi-part polygons, and you can import polygons from shapefiles that you have. You can import polygons from projector if you've entered your data in projector, and things like that. So I won't go through the exercise, just to show you. And then you have your descriptors, and then at the bottom, it's all the things we require. So we have your sugarcane P2R questions, your P2R social survey, the projector results for that particular, so the projected reductions for that particular project. And then we have a section on historical P2R data consent and overlap. So this is a really important part for us. When we make that commitment with the grant agreement of maximizing value, we're very conscious that in a lot of the spaces, such as cane, there's been a lot of investment in the past. And this investment has already achieved practice change and recorded that through Paddock to Reef and reported that. So we have wanted to check that the projects we have are not repeating previous things, but additional, because we have a lot of evidence from Paddock to Reef that program after program after program end up funding the same farm for the same improvement. And we definitely didn't want to fall into that, especially because we knew it was very likely. So while we continue to work with Paddock to Reef, we're getting the consent from all landholders that they're happy for us to get any data that relates to their farm previously. And with that, we were hoping to go to Paddock to Reef and say, look, the landholder has given consent. But that's been a little bit tricky. So at the moment, what we're doing is going to the NRMs, because they have managed a lot of the grants, not all of them, but a lot of them, and check at least with theirs. So this allows us to track whether there's been consent provided and whether we've given them a clearance or not. Then at the end, people also sort of update once I put something here. For example, I'm going to choose Laura Herbert, and I'm going to choose HCPSL, and then they also tell us at what stage of their activities they are. So they're early stages, they just identify the grower, or maybe they're a bit later, they have developed a plan, or they've committed to the practices and they're doing monitoring and stuff like that. So this allows us to monitor on that progress that we've spoken about. So that's the app, and that's what people can use to delivery providers are the ones entering the data, not the farmer. And then what happens is in this one, you can see sort of one project at a time. So then after that, what you can do is look at the dashboards. And this is the bit we were, I suppose, most interested in showing you, because it's the sort of stuff that to people like you guys and us, it's the sort of stuff we can do with the data. So I have a sugarcane dashboard, for instance, that I can open. Doesn't take long to load.
Maybe we can ask for questions at this stage, Mile, before we move
into
dashboards.
Yeah. So any questions so far?
So can I ask a question? I was wondering, so did they then, using the app, take that data and send it directly to the DAF MPA team, to Kev's team? Or do they've got a separate sheet that they send onwards, so they've got a duplicate reporting
They
system?
don't. No, so avoiding duplication is one of the principles that we're following. And that's the reason we don't want double handling and double submissions. So nobody submits to Paddock to Reef, and nobody submits to OGBR on social indicators either. We do all the submission. So every July, we take all the projects that are complete. Sorry, I didn't show it in the app, but you can mark the status of your project as you go along. So once you mark complete, we extract those projects, we QC them, even though they should have QC them themselves. But we QC them, the regional managers QCs them. Then when we check that's all good, then we send it to Paddock to Reef. And similarly, when they're ready to report the social indicators, they let us know, and then we pass that on to Billy's team.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so we didn't want two handling of data. That's happened to us in the past a bit, and we know it just becomes a dog's breakfast, because then people submit their data and then they modify, so they have a different version, and then you don't know by the end what's what. So we just wanted one single line of sight. All right, any other questions to this point?
Milena, it's Margot in Reef Delivery. I was curious about any assurance process you've got. Have you got any ground truthing or are you doing any random sort of assurance process to have a look at some of this reporting on the ground?
Yeah, Margot, we are. So so after 1 year's passed of the project, we are taking a sample of about 10 growers or landholders from every program that we decide, not something that the delivery providers put forward. So we just randomly pick, or we can pick based on the data we see. And then we're giving them, we are engaging an advisor, a technical advisor that's an expert in that commodity, in that region, to come as a member of the technical advisory group. So they're under sort of an agreement with GBRF for confidentiality and all that as well. And we say, look, this is the 10 records and this is the data they've entered in the system. And this is, then the regional program manager puts them in touch with each of the growers, and then they go on the ground and basically they have a very friendly chat with the grower, and they ascertain whether through the program the grower is sort of doing what first, like those activities that, you know, I showed in the progress indicators, and also whether the practices are happening like the, so basically the assessment of that person is they tell us, has the project been fairly represented, but also they take that opportunity to take a couple more, I suppose, information about, you know, likelihood of the practice being enduring, what the grower has found about the program, things like that.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Milena.
Yeah, we've only gone through the very first lot of that in Macau with Sunday because it's just been 1 year since those first programs are.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting, and it definitely came through that. I mean, data is data, and there's always so much room for improvement.
Oh, yeah.
Billy?
We have a question from Billy, yeah.
I just wanted to ask, you said you didn't want anything that was going to be too expensive. Are you actually able to share kind of what it's cost you to set up this this sort of system, and particularly the dashboard side of it?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I think the whole system plus all the GIS support we've received, not only for the system but also for the data, it's been under 200,000, the development of it, and then yeah, so
Look at this.
yeah. Sorry, Jin. Yeah, so anyway, so that's sort of has been it, and we developed it in sort of less than 6 months, which was pretty good. And I mean, when we take out all the humming and ahhing and us deciding what the system needed and people going back and forth and then us realizing what projects were going to be funded, we could say we built it in 3 months. So yeah, that was really good. The dashboards were sort of embedded in the cost, but I reckon the dashboards would have been a very, not the majority of that. I don't know, good, maybe a third of that. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
yeah, and we continue to refine them. Like every week, I find, oh, we could have a filter that lets people do these and stuff. So then we just just shoot an email to our providers, to our GIS software developers, and they change that. So they're very flexible, and that's what I'm saying, customizable but flexible. So so with these dashboards, basically what we can, you're seeing their real data. Don't share these, don't take screen caps, please. But yeah, this is sort of our sugarcane dashboard. So what we can see there is all the projects we have to date. So we have the projects here. We have the different status. So most of them are active. A few are still on application. So this is the stage where we're assessing eligibility for overlaps with historical investments, and also overlaps between programs, like, because we have so many programs, as much as we have processes so that this doesn't happen, we do end up sometimes with 2 projects approaching the same grower and not realizing it. Neither of them knows, only we know. So that sort of stuff.
Mile, probably it will be useful to let them know that when we talk about projects, we are talking about, you know, individual farms and not like projects overall. So each project that we have with a delivery provider could have, you know, 50, 60 individual projects, which are the ones that are shown here.
Yeah.
So everyone knows.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. All right, so yeah, so you have like the different status, and as you can see, they get highlighted as you do this. Then there's those progress indicators, you know, how with HCPSL, I put project cane, and then you could see whether they were at early stages of engaging the grower. So even though each project sees that, we kind of code that to say they're at like early stage, advanced stage, or intermediate stage, and that lets us get a picture of, in terms of activities, how the projects are going. Because sometimes with the management practice questions from P2R, you don't really see change until the very end, but you do have progression of the project. So this is something we came up with to be able to assess how far the projects were progressing. Hey, Robert, welcome. So here we have the expected DEAN, soil, and pesticide savings for that collective of projects that I'm showing here, or here. So these widgets, as you see, sort of are updated according to what you see. So this is what they expect at the beginning. So people at the beginning do a bit of a projection in Projector to say what they expect to achieve. And then at the end, when they complete the projects, then they put the real answers, and then they do that again. So for instance, we have 13 ton of DIN expected, but only 846 have been completed and confirmed. And in fact, we already submitted these ones to P2R this year. So approximate, of course, these expected ones can change. Maybe the practices don't change as much as they expected, but at least it gives us a ballpark of what we're expecting. And to see, as you know, we have contractual targets, and we have contractual targets with delivery providers, and we have targets for the program. So this lets us know sort of roughly how we're plotting to that. Then we have some filters here that we can filter if we want to sort of narrow things down to, like, say, your regional programs. And then if, and this particularly is useful for the regional managers, because then they can see the delivery providers. So I can look at what pharmacists in Mackay are doing, and that's their projects, or what, which is another one, Cane Growers is doing, that's their project. So we have those filters, and then we have a bunch more filters that allow us to see projects at different stages. Some things that help both regional managers and delivery provider identify projects that need addressing, historical overlaps, for example, projects that need attention because there's overlaps with other projects. So I can see something's happening there. So this is sort of all the power of having all this data in a single place and having access. I can see that catchment solutions and maps are overlapping in some projects, so we can follow up, and pharmacists and catchment solutions. So we followed up and see, hey, what's going on? And then we can take decisions as to whether we allow for two complementary projects to take place in a single farm, or whether that should not happen. And so, so when you look at the projects, then you can look into them, and then you see their information. If you want to have a quick browse, you can see if they have social indicators associated to them as well. But then you can also export the data. So for instance, I wanted to export these projects. So then I highlight them, and first of all, I also can put this tab here that is a bit like a spreadsheet and allows me to see the projects I've selected. But then I can also sort of, if I really wanted to inspect that, I can export that to a CSV file, or I can export it to go to P2R Projector, for example. So there's, I'm going to give you an example of something that we do. I guess for that I need to show you there's also the ability to load layers that you have, or layers that we've preloaded. So for instance, we've loaded all the GBR catchments that can be quite useful. And so the other day I needed to extract all the projects for Plain Creek, or actually one of my colleagues needed to do that. So without having any GIS skills or anything, she could go in here and she could, this is Plain Creek, and she could pretty much sort of select the projects. Oh, I need to remove this layer. And do it here. Press the wrong button. Let me do it again. Right, I'll just realize that I don't know what happened there. But yeah, select all the projects from Perlane Creek and export them so that we could very quickly see them on a CSV file, for example. Or you could do something, and so when we come really, no, Jean, you were asking about when we come to report, for example, in July to P2R. So it basically is just as simple as we do a query for completed projects. Obviously, by this stage, we've made sure we've tested and QC and everything. And then we select these projects, and then we can export them as a P2R GeoJSON, which is a spatial file. And that just downloads here, and you can literally upload this to Projecta and submit it to P2R, despite being from multiple organizations, and it will carry all that information through. There was something else I wanted to show you about the adding data bit, and it also allows you to load a data file that you have, and this only stays in the browser. It doesn't go to our system in the cloud. And we find this very powerful because, for instance, we want, say, if Paddock to Reef wanted, but at the moment the NRMs are checking that our projects do not overlap with their historical database. So they basically made a layer of all the projects, Reef projects they funded, and they upload it here, and then that overlays with here, and they can visually see where the data is without us having that data at all. So they're not breaching their confidentiality commitments to not share that data. So yeah, so that's like a really useful thing.
So Milena, probably we can stop once again now and ask for questions if there's anyone. There's been a lot of information. Any questions?
Brilliant system, guys. Can I say that? So it's really good. I think I could see there'd be some challenges from our perspective as Queensland government in being able to host some of the data, but I like the data sets and the elements that you've included in your program. Just positive feedback.
Billy, you had a question?
Milena, you might know this from your time with P2R team some years ago now, but we use the Esri platform as well. Do you think that it would be as easy for them to just sort of just build on a dashboard, or do they already have a dashboard? Do you know that?
Sorry, for whom? For Esri, for users? Or
no,
for...
the P2R team, you know, how they already
P2R?
have an Esri data, database. That's what they use, right, for the reporting. So I'm assuming it's very similar. It just has perhaps that additional functionality. So do you know if they already use a dashboard, or is that something that...
As in the management practices?
Yeah.
Guys? Yeah, no, I don't think they use the dashboard, and I don't know that they, so my understanding of P2R is they have all their data on a machine as opposed to on the cloud.
Okay.
So for using a dashboard, you need to have the data on the cloud. But I mean, it's as simple as uploading it and uploading your database online. It's not difficult, but I just don't know that they have a need for it because Adam and Paul do everything, and they sit in the same office, and it probably works better for them from the perspective of nothing leaking or anything, to be able to say it's just sitting in one computer as opposed to sitting on the cloud. But certainly they could if they wanted, because it's very easy. Once you have something in Esri, you can upload it to the cloud, and then so you can do anybody can do like a basic dashboard. And Adam probably has them internally for his team. Maybe I don't know. I don't think they've ever created anything external. You can do like an out-of-the-box dashboard. The one we have has been customized, but for your data as well, like your data is in survey 1, 2, 3, you could do a dashboard.
Yeah, I do. I have a dashboard, which I haven't really spent any time on, but you kind of given me a few ideas as to what we could do potentially with that. I guess the data is quite, when it first comes in, it's not cleaned. So that's the value that you have, is that you are kind of controlling and QAing it within the system itself. Whereas ours goes through multiple cleaning stages and it doesn't get uploaded back. So that's a process issue, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, any more questions to this stage?
Mile, so Robert Speed has joined the meeting as well. Most of you may know Robert. He is the director of the water quality component. I think you wanted to mention something, Robert?
Well, look, I was just going to highlight. Yeah, sorry, my internet's particularly bad today, so I hope this holds up. Just, I mean, and apologies for being late, and apologies if I'm just repeating things that have already been said, but just to emphasise from my perspective, where I sit in the benefits of having this sort of system, and I mean the clear ones, which Milena sort of has touched on. One, that overlaps function, so for us to be able to check in real time where investments have been historically, as well as if there are concurrent investments going on, and to know that immediately, and then to be able to inquire as to why, and then see if it's a problem or not, work out how we resolve it. The resolution, what you do about it's a whole other matter, but at least having awareness is really important and really valuable. Probably the most useful thing, I think, from our perspective, is this, because we have individual contracted targets around water quality that each of these projects have. So having this sort of visibility allows us to see how projects are tracking, and so they're required, annually we do a review of where they're at as to what they've achieved and what they're on track to achieve. So that comes back to, the expected savings Milena talked about. And so that expected meaning based on the area that they've currently got under, under engagement with landholders, and the benchmarking that's been done, and where those farms are at and where they expect they're going to get them to, what's the model say they're going to achieve. And so we can see if they're a third of the way through, here's how much they've spent, here's how many hectares they've got under engagement, and where those hectares are expected to get to and what that's expected to deliver. We can see all of that. And so we know then if there are projects that are lagging, that we can do something about it. We can talk to them about what practices they can change. We can, in extreme, withhold funding, which we have done. And all of those things are driving the projects to be better, from a water quality improvement perspective, to try and really optimise what are the practices that they work on. But from that, that project and program management to allow us to know in real time is obviously so much more useful than understanding, 2 years down the track when we get a report back from the Paddock to Reef team and discovered that these projects only delivered half what they said they were going to deliver. It's sort of all too late then. So that's the really big advantage from it. But there are also just incidental things that we've found. We were trying to look at potential carbon benefits of some of these projects to understand where there may be carbon co-benefits. And because we have access to this information, we can dive in and look at seeing what exact practices are going on in soil from a soil management perspective, and have some technical advisors look at that sort of information and say, here's what the carbon benefit would expect to come out of these projects, and then think about if that's sufficiently material to investigate further. That's just a final point to say, you never know quite what you might use this information for, but having it available, there's all sorts of things that can emerge. That was all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Oh, Lee, you're muted.
Hi, I was just going to ask one question in relation to where in the landscape the projects are. I think it's a great system here. I'm just thinking of other proponents out there in the reef catchments that are going to be leading projects. Have they got access to where these projects are currently happening, so that there's not overlap and a lot of projects happening on one property rather than in other areas? Is there some source of this information for these agents?
So I guess there's, as you know, there's a lot of sensitivity at the moment around management practices data. So everybody, before giving this data, asks that the data is not shared beyond a certain scope. So we've ended up in a situation, I think, like collectively, where we have so much information, we just can't cross-check it and we cannot share it because one program cannot share it with another program. So GBRF again had to commit that this data would only be used within the program, that it wouldn't be passed on to regulators, that it wouldn't, so this makes it very difficult to have this legacy aspect of the data. As you say, where we have been able to establish data sharing agreements, we found it so powerful because you can look for complementarities. And like with FBA, we have a great agreement. They check the data and they've picked up things that have been really informative for the projects we're doing. But we're very, very constrained, and especially P2R. I think P2R is the source of the truth, because at least all the projects that have happened that have been funded by Reef Water Quality have reported to them. Look, I just think it's the time to really revisit how we can establish a data sharing agreement so that data is not just buried there and only seen by one person, but that investors can also see it. But yeah, Lee, I mean, at the moment, these data, it's only being used within the context of GBRF, and just checking with historical data. We would love that in the future, these can do the same for future projects, and we just don't have a roadmap to that yet, but we would definitely be interested in establishing that. I think it's a good legacy.
I guess it's up to these agencies then when they're rolling out projects to actually have to ask grazing businesses whether they have other projects on their property that there's not.
And look, we have that, how I was talking about that consent form. So if I showed you that consent form, it would say, are you aware of any other sort of Reef Water Quality funded projects that you've done in the past? Yes, what are they? And are you happy for us to check with P2R of any of the data that's happened there? And most farmers have been fine with that. So again, we're playing with the perceptions versus realities of data privacy as well, but most people have said yes to that. We have the consent. We haven't been able to access the data, but yeah.
I'm just conscious of the time. We do have only 3 minutes. Is there anything else in particular that you would like to show from the dashboards, or you've pretty much covered?
Not from the dashboards, but all I wanted to say is in terms of the transferability of a system like this, so we'll obviously continue until the end of our TP. As I said, it's all done on a platform that's kind of open. Any provider or anyone could continue to develop, can continue to service it. So if there was an interest in adopting a system like this one, we would be very happy to share that, and it's totally technically possible. Yeah, so just I guess to throw that as food for thought.
Yeah, I think that's something we'd want to think about. Yeah, I think it's something we'd like to think about. I think.
And I guess similarly, this system can also cater for other investments. So we've structured in a way we had in mind that maybe in the future we'd want to put RLP through it or a Queensland government program through it. So it is able to discern GBRF investments versus others, and there's fields for that, and we can introduce new fields if things are needed. So again, it's quite flexible in that sense if we wanted to build on it.
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking of, Milena, is there's the systems and whether we could build on the system. As a minimum, I would like to check as we go out to our new projects and our project calls, we are collecting virtually exactly the same data. So whether or not we get that agreement to use the system, even if it means that that's delayed a little bit, we make sure that we so all the questions you may have about consent and all that sort of stuff, we go in and make sure that whatever we're looking for actually aligns, so that we don't start collecting data now that we couldn't put into the system if we were able to go that way. But I think that's a bigger conversation internally. So, but that first one would be a good one to have.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, so from the two options of transferring or adopting a system on this one or building on this one, the advantage of adding to this one is that you have all this historical data to check against.
Yeah.
And there have been projects that have been checked against historical data as well. So, yeah.
And there's advantages to that, because if we could argue that the data is not sitting in QG, but sitting on an independent platform, maybe we can go a bit further. Anyway, think about it.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Milena. I think given the time, we'll leave it there. Obviously, there's a lot of room to continue these conversations. As I said before, I have recorded this session. So for those who were not able to join, we will share the recordings later on. And we could, talk about next steps next year. If there's another presentation that is required, we can do that, or anything else that, we could think about that will be useful for all of you. So thank you very much for your time. Billy, is there something else you want to say? I can see you typing.
Just saying thank you very much. It is a really good system, and I think it's really helpful that you've managed to split away from, I guess, the data privacy issues that we have faced for so long. So I think, if there is willingness at some point to look at a data sharing agreement, I think that's something that we should be collectively working on, because ultimately that is the only way that we'll be able to reduce some of the overlaps that we're seeing.
Yeah.
I think
And
that's,
also with paddock to reef as well. I think it's
Yeah,
fine
that's what I mean. That's what I mean. Yeah, I mean everybody. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving us this briefing today. That's fantastic. And
Pleasure. Thank you for listening.
I think one of the things that's also is we'll go away and mull over and go, okay, these are the questions we didn't ask that we'd like to ask. So that's fantastic. And I